Well, welcome everybody. Welcome Judy Nimer Muhn from Milford, Michigan, and she's going to talk to us tonight on Beginning Genealogy, the basics. She has been doing this, one thing that I noted, since she was 12. She was just kind of talking about that and then got out of it and then got back into it. Just so everyone knows, we are going to be recording this so we can view it again and put it on our Buchanan District Library YouTube channel. You all are automatically muted. If you do want to do the chat and put a Q before your question, just so we know it's a question, Meg will go through those at the end. We'll have about 10 minutes or so left where we can get questions. Write them down, write them as you go, whichever you prefer. And like Judy just said, we sent out a couple of worksheets that you could do, the family tree, 10 essentials, family history, research forms, and then Judy's linear journeys. So without further ado, welcome, Judy.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll get started. I'm really excited. I love talking to people that, for whatever reasons, either just are starting now or just getting back into it, because there's so much that has changed. And certainly when I started at the age of 12, we didn't have the internet. So y'all are blessed. There's a lot easier ways to do genealogy these days. So it's always fun to sort of start with something a little bit silly. So genealogy cartoons being what they are, it's good to make fun of yourself in the process of this. Heavens knows probably most of you have had the eyes rolling and the family disinterested kind of reaction, but sometimes we just have to remember that we can't take ourselves too seriously in this work. Our family members maybe could care less about the stories of Uncle Henry or the antics of great Aunt Jessie or whatever that looked like. And so it's always good to just be a little bit lighthearted about some of this. So I hope that you'll start your research that way and keep that in mind throughout. So one of the things we're going to do is talk about these sort of categories. So when I create a presentation of any kind, and certainly because I may or may not know enough about you or the backgrounds that are all coming to this topic, I think about the kind of things that I would want to know. And certainly back when I got started at the age of 12, I had no clue. And I was sent home from school with a 4-generation genealogy chart from my school teacher. And it was her way to try and teach us about immigration patterns, right? So she said, go home and find out where your families are from. And the whole idea of it was to figure out, well, what were the routes that they took? Well, she didn't realize it, but she ended up, fostering a young genealogist at that point. But when I went home and I asked my mom, hey, I have to do this school project, where's our family from? My mom said, you need to talk to Aunt Catherine. That was her older sister, who had the most extensive network of people that she wrote letters to. So you have to remember, this is back in the 60s. Nobody had the internet. Postage was really cheap. Maybe it was 10 cents. I don't remember. But Aunt Catherine wrote letters to our extended family all over the upper Midwest and back into Canada. So I descend from people who are French Canadian, First Nations from Canada, which is what Americans call Native Americans, and then German and Polish, Scottish, and probably bits of other stuff. But nonetheless, I wish I would have had somebody help me. So I was thinking from that perspective when I thought about this presentation, and certainly have refined it over the years as I've given it in other places. But I'm going to give you these 6 steps, and then we'll talk through in some detail about each of them. And your handout has more information than we could even cover here. And I also kept it simple. So please know that on that handout, my email address is there. and my website. So either way, if you want to connect with me to find, get an answer to a really simple question. So please, I'm not going to research your family for you or whatever, but if you're just like, well, where do I locate this? I can help with that kind of simple stuff, right? But Sarah and Meg are at the library. They have resources through the library that you can utilize. So we'll talk a little bit about some of that. So let's get into it. But these are going to be the 6 things that I generally will talk about, and adding in some extra stuff that hopefully will help you. So first, there's the distinction between what is a pedigree and what is a family tree. So a pedigree, in sort of the lingo of the community, is used to track ancestors of one person. So that would be you at the bottom of the chart, for instance, and then your parents above and next to you, and then going back in time. So that's the one that most of us used in genealogy, that most people refer to as a family tree. But then there's also the tree of descendants that you can refer to, often called a descendancy chart. And that often is used to find all of the, certainly as much as you can, living descendants of one distant ancestor. That can be helpful from the standpoint, certainly, of those people who perhaps were adopted and they're using DNA, and we'll talk about DNA tonight, to use the DNA to find sort of a distant most ancestor and then bring the information forward through time to living people so that they might be able to figure out who their relationships are, maybe who a missing biological mom or dad is. You can also do what's called an ascendancy chart, which is very much like a pedigree. So all of them are often referred to in genealogy circles as trees. So don't let it boggle you up too much. Mostly when we're referring to trees, most of us will be referring to the chart that we created that has our name on the first line and then goes back through time. So there's only certain instances when descendancy charts are really helpful. In other words, I know who my ancestor is from 1604, and I'm trying to find all the descendants of that person. That's a little bit less common than the example of me and then going back 4 generations, that sort of thing. So in constructing a tree, and in those family history magazine handouts that you have, there is a copy of a blank tree. So with all of those forms, by the way, you can always go to the Family Tree Magazine's website. Those are free. So I'm not violating copyright. They give that away free. But maybe make copies from that so that you're not writing on the master copy, and start with yourself. So I recommend to everyone to start writing in pencil initially, because you're going to think that you have some basic information. But until you find documents that verify some of that, I don't recommend writing in pen, because you're more often than not going to go back and erase something. Starting with yourself, though, make sure you have a copy of your birth certificate. So that's a good start. If you're married, a copy of your marriage certificate. Those are dates now that you've verified with that piece of paper. Those you could write in if you wanted to in pen. But then going back in time, asking your mom and dad for similar documents. And the classic documents certainly are what we call vital records, births, marriages, and deaths. But then also, depending on your faith tradition, you may have baptisms and confirmations or first communions or the rites of burial or any number of other things that are celebrated by the community of faith that you practice in. So when you have those kinds of dates, fill that in as well. The key element of it is to make sure you fill it out with the names as they appear on the document, the dates that you find, and especially the locations. The locations will help you to locate the people in a place and a time, and then writing the name out from the various documents will begin to help you, certainly the further back you go in time, for multiple name spellings and variations on those name spellings and how different people recorded them. You'll also get hints to whether or not your ancestors were literate or not, whether they could write their own name, whether they were writing the name on the document versus something like a census document where there was a census taker writing the name down. Could they spell their name? So those are some key things that'll tell you something about your family and their background, their heritage, their education, etc. So in your little packet of forms there are family group sheets. So one of the really key elements of not only constructing a tree, but doing research is to do research on everybody in the family. And I know that maybe sounds not only tedious, but really, really a lot of work. The key element of it is to get into the practice of researching brothers and sisters and all of the aunts and uncles, etc. Because the further you go back in time, if you keep that practice up, the more likely it is that maybe researching that, great, great, great uncle or auntie or somebody who was a cousin to your grandfather or grandmother, they might have something in a record you find on them that will tell you about maybe the location of a family after they moved, or another spelling variation, or information about maybe their religion or a location that you hadn't even thought that the family would have lived in. And yes, families do disperse, certainly in very modern times they do. But back in the day, most of our families moved in groups. So they moved in ethnic groups, they moved in language groups, they moved in groups of people that were often the same faith. Faith communities were far more important in the 1800s, perhaps than in some ways now. But if you find something for a great uncle, chances are the rest of his family, including your great grandparent, might be in the near locale. So it's helpful to research all of these people and to track what they're doing, where they're living, how many kids they're having, and what kind of neighborhood they're living in. It'll give you clues to ethnicity. It'll maybe give you clues to religion. So one of the key differences between just a really simple example from here in North America, the United States Census records do not report any kind of religious faith representing, representative with the person. On the other hand, cross the border into Canada and you can find out your family's faith from the census record. The Canadians didn't have the same thing around the separation of church and state as we do in the United States. So that can be key information if one of your family members perhaps crosses the border from New York into Canada and the other family stayed behind, but when they go into Canada, they may be joining a Baptist church. That might give you a clue for what the family's doing in New York. So you're going to be collecting a lot of research tools. So it's pieces of paper like I have in the image here. Those are documents that I actually began using back in the 1960s and then coming forward in time. You can see that a couple of them are in color. I have a thing for color, and there were systems of setting up genealogy notebooks where you would put different parts of your family in blue and green and orange and all of that. I do have all of that, and I have almost entirely fully converted to digital because it's just far too much paper, and I've gotten very much more ecological about not killing trees. On the other hand, if you really like having a piece of paper as a document, you have to think about having multiple copies of forms. So that's why we gave you the free copies in that Family Tree magazine compilation. But you'll find other forms that maybe you like the format differently. Plenty of that stuff is up online and for free. So don't hesitate to go looking. You probably will need a scanner or copier or the combination. So I have a 4-in-1, which is a printer, scanner, copier, and fax. Well, I don't use the fax function anymore, but I actively use all of the rest. So you want to have access to it. And certainly the library is a resource. You know, a lot of office supply places will have copy machines, you know, the Staples and the Office Depots and places like that, but they're really expensive. So if you have the wherewithal to have something of your own in whatever space you're doing your research, that can be helpful. There are free computer programs that will help you put your family genealogy on your computer so that you don't have to use these paper documents if you don't want to, or you can do both. It depends on how much work you want to do. So there are a number of computer programs out there. There are online programs where you can type in your family tree for free and then look at it online at any time. My caution with those is that so can everybody else. So the free ones are through Family Search, which is an organization that the Mormon Church has created to help in organizing records for all of us worldwide. It's a wonderful site and it's free to anyone to use, but they have the goal of creating the world's family trees, so interconnecting everybody from everywhere. It's a really remarkable goal, and I'll tell you that it's a really remarkable site, and if you put your tree there, you might find a cousin or two. On the other hand, if you put your tree there, other people might change something on it, and you'll have to go back periodically and look so that you can correct things that are done wrong. There are plenty of books and magazines that you can either purchase, get interlibrary loan, or the library might already have subscriptions to. So the Family Tree magazine, I am not promoting it I don't get anything out of it. I'll just tell you that it's one of the magazines that survived in the American market over many years. There used to be a lot more genealogy magazines, but financially and otherwise, they've folded. Great Britain has a lot of magazines that you can actually get here in the United States through stores like the Barnes & Noble and things like that. I don't know if maybe your library there has them, but one of my favorites is Who Do You Think You Are? And it's based off of a genealogy TV show that while it runs here in the United States, they don't produce a magazine here, but it runs in different versions in Great Britain, and they create a magazine about it. And I've found that particular magazine in local Barnes & Noble stores. So you might want to check out what's available because they are out there. There's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of books. So on your handout, I've given you a fundamentally awesome book rather than confuse you with all the books that there are. You could go to virtually any library. I'm sure Sarah and Meg could fill you in on what's at the Buchanan Library. But the book that I shared with you by Val Greenwood is a standard of the field. He has written these books, so I believe the version that I cited for you is the 4th edition. I think that's the most recent version. And the challenge is you could buy it probably really inexpensively on eBay in a previous edition, and it just won't have as up-to-date internet information, but so what? The basic information in this book has been really excellent from day one. So Val Greenwood's book is a really, really great one. So it's on your handout. I think it's probably maybe down on page 2. So look into books, go to the library. I don't even know if the Buchanan Library is open for patrons to come, but you could certainly query and, go and see what's on the shelf. There's probably a lot. A lot of the handouts and things that you can use, the tools, are checklists. So genealogists all over the world have figured out that certain tools work really, really well and will help you organize your thoughts and make sure that you're getting all the right information. So you can see some of those forms in my picture here on the slide. These are easily found in a variety of places. You've got an initial packet, but if there's something specific you're looking for, send me an email. I probably have a copy that I've downloaded from someplace, and it might be free for me to share. I will be really careful about copyright because I really believe that that's a key element of what we do as genealogists. You're allowed to copy one copy for yourself, but you're not allowed to, put it out there for everybody without permission, of course. And then there's tons and tons of websites and memberships. So I'll share with you again on the handout that there's some websites for the genealogy organizations that have presence on the internet. Some of them charge you pretty significant amounts of money. Ancestry is the notable one. But like I said, Family Search is free, and you can do research on that. The library has a copy of Ancestry Library Edition, which is a free version to you, and you just use your library card to log into the library's website, and then through the library's website, you get access to Ancestry's Library Edition. It's not the complete Ancestry that you would get if you pay the big money, but it at least helps you, certainly for all of you as beginners, get some really basic information that's really helpful. But you could spend a lot of money doing genealogy. Be really careful and mindful of the fact that there's ways to do it without spending a lot of that money. If you want quick, easy, and fast, spend some money. If you're willing to take your time and find the free sites, that's a way to do it without getting in over your head. So you first get started, like I said, with starting with yourself. But then as you move on, begin around not only your own home, but within the homes of members of your family. Holidays are perfect opportunities to interview family or friends. We all have smartphones at this point, and they have a recorder on them. So talk to your family and turn the recorder on so that you don't have to hurry up and scramble at taking notes, but you can instead listen to the wonderful stories. And oh, by the way, then that recording becomes something that you can keep as a keepsake that has your relative's voice on it, so that, knock on wood, when they pass, you still have that beloved voice on a recording, telling a wonderful story about your family. So use that as an opportunity to try and get at what are the stories that are needed to help you fill out your family tree. Certainly letter writing is often really important to do. There are people, believe it or not, that still don't do emails. And sometimes that's church secretaries or, people that are archivists. A lot of people do have emails and you can get to them that way. But there are some members of our communities that don't like sending out information on emails beyond just some sort of nice things, that they'll offer to help you with or whatever. They maybe want to do it more privately. So be prepared to do some letter writing perhaps. And there's always a really good way to extend courtesies to them for paying for postage and return or paying for copies so that you can collect photographs and papers that otherwise you wouldn't get access to. I can't tell you enough about the importance of using things on social media. Facebook has well over 16,000 pages dedicated just to genealogy. So genealogy by geography, by surname, by ethnicity, military records, census information, immigration, by country and locale all over the world. Instagram too has helpful hints about genealogy, photographs of some tools that you might use like these checklists, or even pretty printout sheets that you can put your family tree on. If you're interested in the Facebook list, I can send you a link for it. And actually, maybe when we're doing our chat, I'll type it into the chat box. There's a woman here in Michigan, Catherine Wilson, who is a wonderful genealogist, but she's also a wonderful compiler. And she created lists of Facebook genealogy pages for all of us. It's well over 400 pages, well over 16,000 Facebook entries, and they're categorized by ethnicity and region and geography and city and all of those categories I mentioned. When you're looking around home, it's really important to be a snoop, right? So sounds kind of weird, but look for what looks to be a really odd piece of china or some kind of picture on the wall that looks really old. Look for old scrapbooks. Look for pieces of lace. Look for clothing items that maybe are tucked in the back of a closet. Ask questions of your family when you see that stuff. Where did that come from? Did you get that from grandma or grandpa? You might find out about heirloom items that have been passed down in the family that have a story with them. And now you've begun putting a face on your family. You've begun filling out the story. One of the things we as genealogists talk about is filling in the dash. So if you think about from the standpoint of a tombstone often has a birth year and a death year, and there's a dash between them. Well, aren't we all more than that dash, right? Our story of what happens in our lives from our birth until our death is the kind of things through heirlooms and stories and pictures and more that fill out the details beyond vital records like birth, marriage, and death. So supplies. You will need some organization kinds of system, and especially if you're into doing paper in volumes, so notebooks and file folders and file cabinets and all of that. If you're thinking about saving trees, there's also ways to do that through computer programs online and software programs that'll help you to save things on your computer. But you also need to remember that there's archival issues and preservation. So what if your computer crashes? You better be backing it up. Documenting what you find. Where did you get it? Did you find it at the Buchanan Library? Or did you go up to Lansing to the Library of Michigan and find information about your family in city directories or whatever? Documenting where you found an item is really, really key. What some genealogists do when they go researching in other facilities is they might print out a paper copy of a document, and then with the number 2 pencil on the back, they'll write the location of where they found that. There are very formalized systems for documenting, or what we call citations in genealogy. If you want to get into that, send me an email so I can tell you some of the books that'll give you information about how to do that well. You might even have access to those books at your library. I would encourage you to get them through interlibrary loan before you buy anything, because then you can make sure if it's something that you want to have on your bookcase to refer to all the time, or you maybe just need it once or twice. Computer programs, like I said, are a really great way to keep things on your home computer. You can utilize your laptop or even your cell phone through mobile apps. I've given you on your handout a number of the mobile apps that you can get. Easily use those. You don't have to haul huge notebooks and heavy stuff around with you. You can actually use a tablet, a laptop, or a cell phone to get at your genealogy trees. Really good for storage as well as displaying to somebody, especially if you go on one of those wonderful summer road trips where you go to the place where your great-great-great-great-grandfather is buried and lived. You can actually show it to people at the resources in the town or the historical society rather than having to haul out a 3-ring binder. So look at some of those references, and we're going to leave open time so you can ask me some questions. But it's really important to begin right from the beginning in organizing your things so that they're in such a way that you can understand how to find great-great-grandma's sheet of paper in a 3-ring binder, so that when you're at a library and you think you found a record about her, you can turn to her page pretty easily and check it out. History centers and libraries are the key resources initially, certainly for all of you as beginning genealogists, but even increasingly as we all go back in time, I'm still going back and looking at some of these records. There's a couple of really key elements of how we can help each other in doing this kind of research, both at history centers and libraries. Having a genealogy buddy can be really helpful for helping you scan through what you think you've already done and helping you to look at it with new eyes. So given that I started at the age of 12 by getting information about my ancestors, I've actually in more recent times gone back and looked at that very much older information because I've learned enough to look at the records with different eyes. I look at census records instead of just for the names and how old people were. Now I look at them for what was their occupation, what was the value of their land, who were their neighbors, and what was the value of their land? Was this a wealthy community or was it a poorer farming community? So that helps a lot. History centers and libraries often have records unique to that locale. They have information that's perhaps tax records that have been compiled into a book, or a document from classically the Daughters of the American Revolution have gone around the country and documented the cemeteries in different localities. Your library may have a copy of that documentation of the local cemeteries. Often there are church records or fraternal organizations that will have centennials and bicentennials that they publish, and they end up in history centers or libraries so that the broader public can look at them. Newspapers on microfilm and digitally, as well as index and family genealogies, are on a lot of computer programs, but many of them are printed. If you haven't been, for instance, to the Library and Archives of Michigan up in Lansing, you will find just reams and reams of this stuff. But your local library has a lot for you if your family has actually lived in that community for a long time. And there are easy ways, free sites, that you can get newspapers and other information online as well. Certainly in the pandemic environment, most of us are using the internet far more than we ever thought we would. Books and journals and genealogical societies are really, really great for fleshing out those sort of dash relationships that I referred to. So filling in who all the sons and daughters were in the family and who they married, and did they all stay in the same community, and what was their faith tradition? Were they leaders in the community? Were they farmers? Did they have a sawmill, et cetera, et cetera? I can't emphasize enough the importance of genealogical societies for helping you to continue your learning. I said something earlier as some of you were coming in about how I continue to learn so much, having started over 40, 45 years ago. There's so much to continually learn about not only history, land, deeds, wills, information about how people moved around the country and around the world. So do look into local genealogy societies or genealogy societies for the ethnic group that you recognize your family came from. Here in Michigan, we have genealogy societies for French Canadians, Hungarians, German, Polish, Irish, you name it, right? So you get the idea. Look around for those groups. And if you want some references from me, I can certainly help you out. Records are often referred to in genealogy circles as primary or secondary sources. Primary sources or primary records are considered to be those records that are created on the spot in the moment when the event happened. So a primary record, for instance, is a birth record, usually created at the hospital where the mother gave birth to the child. Is where the first indication of what the baby's name is, and the date, certainly, and usually even the time of the birth of the baby. That's called a primary record. A secondary record is a record that is created later. It's usually something like a compilation. It might be an index to primary records, or it might have been told to somebody in some way, so that there could be errors in it. So you often have to look for multiple sources of some of the same information in order to be sure that you've got the right thing. So secondary records, like I said, are often indexes. They may be things like compilations from the church has a centennial, and they create a list of who the founders of the church were. Those are secondary items. They're very helpful. They guide you to other records, but they aren't done at the time of the actual event. So primary records tend to be, like I said, birth records, marriage records, death records, burial records, things that would have been done right then and there when the event is happening. And primary records are by far the ones you want. That's the best source. Secondary records, because somebody told somebody or somebody was transcribing it, maybe from a written document or a ledger or a compilation, we're all humans, so errors can be made. That's why secondary records should be backed up by looking for where the information came from or finding the same family in the same locale with other records to back you up. So with a secondary record, for instance, a city directory, which is compiled from reaching out to families in the community and asking them who lives in their household. And they usually did them back in the day where people would go door to door. There could be transcription errors in the spelling of the name, especially if your family was illiterate. Even in some ways, there's elements of census records that is somewhat what we would call secondary, because the census taker is writing it down. And let's say, for instance, the woman in the household wants to say that she's younger than she really is. That's not uncommon to find census records that are 10 years apart and have the woman 8 years difference in age. So that happens. So you have to go looking for other documentation that verify her true age. Where to get more information? There's always more. So number one, really good records are the faith communities that our people lived in and the primary records like birth, marriage, and death records that are kept by our government. Other sources of records include things that the county courthouse holds on our families, land records and the transition of buying and selling land, wills and probate records. Many communities, many states have special censuses. The federal census happens every 10 years on the year that ends with a 0. But some states have indexes and censuses that happen in years that end on 5. Those can be helpful, especially if a family is moved. The Daughters of the American Revolution, the Sons of the American Revolution, if your people go back as far as the Revolution, have an incredible library and a website that will help you to find some of your ancestors. In our French-Canadian families, the word repertoire shows up. That's literally a French word for an index, but there are compilations of family trees all over the place, and certainly family associations who are online and maybe produce a newsletter, but certainly may have a Facebook page or other way for you to find them, may have every 5-year reunions, may have a newsletter that they send out, usually now via email. Again, using Facebook for that is really, really great. And then the new frontier is DNA. So let me talk a little bit about that in a minute. Again, documenting everything on the pieces of paper that you can collect information about a singular ancestor or a whole family will help you to remember not only what you found, where you found it, but also don't forget to note when you've looked for a record and you didn't find your family, because that's just as much of a clue as finding a record. So say, for instance, you thought that your family lived in Livingston County, and you go and look at, you take a drive across the state, and you go to Livingston County and you look in the local library, or you go up to Lansing and look what they have, and you don't find them in Livingston County in the years that you think. That's a clue that maybe they were in another county. Maybe that's a clue that Livingston County, maybe it's a Livingston County in another state, and you misunderstood that it was Michigan. So there's a couple of things that are really important. Note too, when you don't find them where you thought they should be. So let's talk a little bit about DNA, because you've probably seen some things about that on the news and certainly in TV shows. There are 3 kinds of DNA that is tested and utilized in genealogical research. By far the most common is called autosomal DNA, which is the DNA that we all inherit, half from our mother and half from our father. There's certainly a lot of classes online, certainly a lot of information that you can get that can show you how to use that. But if you just remember seeing things, certainly Ancestry has ads on TV about, oh, our family is from Germany, and, I wear a lederhosen now. That was always a funny commercial to me, because he switched from lederhosen to a Scottish kilt. It was so cute. Anyway, the mtDNA, or mitochondrial DNA, all children inherit from their mothers, but only the daughters pass it on. So you have inherited from your mother's 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 mother, going back into distant time, mitochondrial DNA. Your brother would have inherited mitochondrial DNA too, but he doesn't pass it forward. Only women do in their X chromosome. Y DNA helps to track father's 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 father, and girls don't have it because it's on a Y chromosome, and we women only get 2 X chromosomes. Using DNA is great for finding cousins who may have pictures that you've never seen, or information about the family that you didn't know, or helping your family through a brick wall because the family changed their name so many times. It's also really good for seeking medical information and what's the history of your family in the way of certain diseases, like inherited things like diabetes and hypertension and heart disease. So DNA can be really revolutionary, and it can be really great, especially for people that were adopted and would like to find out something about their genetic family. So I can talk more about that in longer scenarios, but not tonight. We're just talking beginning, and I don't want to overwhelm you. So with that, I'll stop talking, and I'd love to hear what kind of questions you have, what kinds of things you'd like to know about. All of my information on how you can contact me is on your handout. So I'll stop sharing so I can see your lovely faces on camera. And I'm also going to go and find that website about the Facebook pages that I told you about on Catherine Wilson's website, because I think that that would be really helpful for you. And I neglected to put it in your handout, and I realized that after I came up with, came here online. So let me find her for you.
So if anyone has a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat box, and I will read them off so that Judy can answer them. So Judy, if you're ready, we've got one that Wendy put in a little while ago.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Okay, she wants to know what resources would be best for international searches, European specifically.
Well, so it depends on where in Europe. So I will also give you a website that I think might be helpful for you in the way of, certainly exploring certain key elements of the world and finding geographical and ethnic information. So I just posted the information from Catherine Wilson's website, which is there, Moon Swings Files, and then it says genealogy on Facebook. So use that for the Facebook pages. the next post that I just put up is called Cindy's List. So if you haven't found Cindy's List online, Cindy, so it's a free website, and Cindy, because thankfully of sponsorship and everything else, she has gotten her website funded. So she offers everything to us for free, and she updates links all the time. So she categorizes everything. So you could type in, find a European country on Cindy's List, and she'll have links there that will give you ideas about resources that are online for those countries there, so that you can look at those websites and find out what's available. I'll tell you that a lot of the paid sites for genealogy, Ancestry, MyHeritage, Find My Past, things like that, they have things categorized by country, the records that have been microfilmed and scanned so that they're digitally available to you. But again, you have to pay a fee. Family Search, which is the website of the Mormon Church that I talked about, they have a lot of the countries also on their site for free. So you could look up their information, and they have a help page that has not only translations of, you know, what the months look like in German, what the dates look like in French, what, you know, et cetera, in various languages, so that when you look at the records, the actual document of the, you know, the photograph of the handwritten document, then you can even translate for yourself. So I've given those in the chat box. I hope you all see those.
Okay, great. We've got another question from Mary. She says her family is new to the US. What's the best way to read and understand Polish and French documents?
So there's a couple of ways to do that. Number one, study French, study Polish. Not easy, right? I actually literally learned French. I descend from Quebecois people, French Canadians, and grew up hearing my ancestors speaking Quebecois, but I didn't retain it. Then I took it in high school. And if you don't use it, you lose it. So I'm retaking French. So it's fun, but easier. Join a French Canadian society, join a Polish American society, and there are people there who actually read and speak the language. And mostly they'll help you translate at least some of it for free. There are also in that Catherine Wilson list, organizations on Facebook that if you photograph a page, and please, not a big long page, but a shorter document that maybe is just a birth record, and you post a photograph of that on those Facebook pages, there are people there that'll translate it for you within minutes. So it's a way to do it, but there are word lists on a lot of these family search, like on the Family Search website, on Cindy's List, there's lots of word lists. The handwriting is by far harder than figuring out the wording. So I'll tell you that if you can learn the harder handwriting, the words are not as bad at all. But there are lots of us that go on these websites on Facebook, and we'll see somebody's posted a document that's maybe a marriage record or a death record or something. It's very easy for us to translate because we're used to the handwriting and we readily know the words. So if you wanted to get started on it, use a simple document, post it on that Facebook page, look at what the translation looks like, and then try and learn for yourself. One of the things that I do is take a piece of tracing paper over some handwriting that I have a really hard time reading, and I'll use it to trace the loops to try and feel like, well, is that an E or is that a T or what is that? Sometimes I can figure it out for myself. But again, those of us that look at them all the time, we usually can figure it out for you. So take advantage of it. It's sort of one of those random acts of kindness thing that genealogists do.
Okay, well, we don't have any more questions right at the moment, so if anybody has them, now's the time. I did want to mention, Judy, I think you said something about the library has ancestry library edition that people can use. So our library doesn't have that specifically, but we do have something called My Heritage Library Edition, which is through the Michigan.
Very similar. Yeah, very similar.
You can find that on the Acadian library page under online resources. It's actually the first link right there at the top. You click on that. You just have to type in your name and your library card number and you have access to it. And I was just playing with it right now. It was really fun. I found my dad's yearbook photos.
There you go. Yep.
And some records from my family who immigrated from Greece. So it was kind of cool and really easy to use.
It is very easy to use. So the only thing about the library editions is they don't have what the full paid version does.
Sure.
For anybody that's just starting out, they're going to have a lot of the basics. They're going to cover census records and marriage records and things like that pretty easily for you. Yep. Do you have a family search facility in your community, like one of the Mormon affiliate libraries?
Yeah, that I'm not sure about, to be honest. We have a really nice local history room in our library. This isn't real specific necessarily to family history, but we have a great, Peter Lisi is our local historian extraordinaire, and he really is helpful if anybody has questions, especially in Buchanan specifically. If your family's lived there for a long time,
Sure.
there's a good chance that he could help you find records about your family, you know, or a house maybe that you live in. He's helped people figure out the history of the house that they're in. So, but yeah, I'm not sure about what you're asking about specifically.
Yeah, I'm only asked because that can be a research facility option as well. If, you know, there's somebody that, those are free.
Where do you know?
To the library in Salt Lake City.
Well, we're fairly close to Fort Wayne, Indiana.
You are.
Which has
You
an
are.
awesome genealogy library. So
I
yeah,
know that
Buchanan
is the best. Yeah.
it, yeah.
Yeah.
But, and we do have access to other libraries in our state's libraries. We're a town of 4,500. So, but we're very lucky to be able to reach out to any other library in Michigan and grab a book, and they send it right to us.
Yeah, interlibrary loan is by far a wonderful tool that I have so benefited from over the years because, you know, none of us can travel as much as we would like to, and it costs money. So, you know, getting a book from Pennsylvania, interlibrary loan, to, you know, look up your family, and you know, there's nothing like it. So
Yeah.
I encourage everybody on here to talk to Meg and Sarah there, because they'll be able to help you search for what's available. But Fort Wayne is awesome if you ever get a chance to go there. And I would say, for those of you that haven't been and you think about taking the drive, because it's a short drive, I would say either email or call ahead and arrange for one of the librarians to give you a bit of a tour, because it is large and it can be overwhelming, but they can direct you to certain areas of the library collection that will feel less overwhelming, and you can kind of take it in stages. But it's a great place. It's one of those places where you kind of want to go and book a hotel room and stay over for a while. So,
Yeah, it's a fun place.
yeah. Any
Does anybody else
questions?
have-
Y'all are pretty quiet.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Judy. I'm sure if they're not going to be shy if you've offered to reach out if they have a quick question. That's very
Sure.
nice. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to help. I mean, it is sort of the pay it forward element. Somebody helped me when I was 12 and 14 years old. I'm happy to pass that on. So.
Okay. Anybody else real quick? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and get on it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye, all. Have a great night.